In this tutorial we are going to deal with some selection methods, some adjustment methods, some layer interaction, basically to take this picture and to isolate this character in the scene. We're going to use selection methods to isolate the outline of the man standing against the wall. We're going to take him and put him onto a new layer. We are going to apply a filter to the background scene and also some blur options to the background scene and a gradient map. So all of these different options will come together to form our final scene. Firstly, I will need to look at selecting the outline of this particular character. So I'll use the control key and I'll zoom in close enough to him. The spacebar on the keyboard allows us to invoke pan. So when I hold down the spacebar and move the mouse, it will move the image around backwards and forwards. And this will be quite important as we try to map around the area of the man. The tool itself that we're going to use will be the scissors select. So picking on this fella, it will then allow us to start to click to place points that will allow me to map around the basic outline of the profile. So as I click and place to add points, you can see that the cursor starts to grab on images. It starts to grab a selection. It uses edge detection to figure out the coloring differences between the pixels. So as I click, it will form a selection, and it will be able it will do its best to try and pick out the pixels where it seems to find an edge. So you can see, especially around his hat, where the contrast between pixels is quite large, it's able to pick up the border reasonably well. So I'm going to use all of these selection methods. I'll keep on clicking, and when I get to a point where I can't see any more of the character itself, I'll hold down the spacebar and I'll move to select more. So I continue to add points as I see fit, around areas where the contrast is not very large. For example, the shadows now in a couple of clicks. We'll do our best just to place as many points as we can. The beauty about this selection method is that it's not permanent, in that when I finish the outline, I will be able to go back and tweak some of the points and move them in case I make a mistake. So I'll continue to select, continue to pan where necessary. Okay, so it's almost a freehand selection, but it's more intelligent than that. Freehand selection would be like using a simple pencil just to try and outline it, and wouldn't be very accurate. When I get back to the final point, you'll see that the cursor changes slightly and two dots appear, or two circles appear beside the cursor to denote that I've got back to the start point. And now that I've finished the selection, I can now go back and pick any point and move that point slightly, and it will recalculate the position of the pixel selection. So possibly at the hand here, I might move a few of those nodes just to try and pick up a little bit better, possibly around his face. So I can add in a few nodes where I see fit. When I am happy with the selection, if I zoom back out again, you can see that I have the majority of the characters selected quite well. If I hit return on the keyboard, it transfers the dots and the paths that I've chosen into a selection. You'll see down the bottom, down towards the status bar, you'll see press enter to convert to a selection. When I press return, it now gives me this marching ants visual display, which means that this particular area here has been converted to a selection. Now I haven't done anything with the selection, but I will now apply some options. If this was just purely a selection and I wanted to erase that selection, you'll notice that the erase option only erases within that selection. So I have isolated this area, so I could basically erase everything. Now obviously I don't want to do that, but you'll notice that because it is a selection, it's only allowing me to act upon that area that I have selected. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer. That new layer, I'm going to give a name, man outline. Okay, and you can see that it creates a new layer here. And before I do anything else, what I am going to do is I'm going to duplicate this background layer. Okay, and I'm going to rename that layer. I'm going to call it backup. Now, what that allows me to do is it allows me to keep this layer as a backup, obviously. And when I turn it off, I won't actually do anything now. I won't actually, if I do anything wrong with the pixels, I can always return and keep this backup layer. I could possibly move it down in the stack. Okay, so that's at the very bottom of the stack. So if anything else happens to the background layer here, which we could actually rename to be the original content. If I do anything destructive to this particular layer, I still have the original there. So I can use the backup layer to replace this layer. I actually will do some destructive content to this layer in a short while. It is a case that if I do make a mistake or do anything drastic to this layer, I can always use the backup and duplicate that back into the stack. So now I have this layer here, which is currently empty. So I'm going to take a copy of my selection. So I'm going to go to the Edit pull-down menu and copy. And I'm going to switch to the top layer and I'm going to Edit Paste. Now, an unusual thing about GIMP, and it's kind of odd it does it, it's something that I haven't got my head around yet, this floating selection. Now what it's doing is it's asking me, or asking for a confirmation of where I want to place the new content. And to confirm that content, I anchor the floating layer. And what it will do is it will now paste the content into the layer below. So I'm going to use the anchor option, and it will now paste a copy of that data from the original layer into the outline layer. So if I was to turn off this original content, you'll see that that is the isolated elements that I've selected. So I've done a reasonably good job of selecting the outline of that particular man, separating him onto a new layer. I still have all of the original content. Again, it was a copy option, it wasn't a cut option. And I do have the backup as well, so in case I do anything silly with my work, then I can always reintroduce or reintegrate this layer back into the image. So that will do for the first step. Again, isolating the man, copying and pasting him so that I only have him as the content that I can work on one particular layer.